This July makes 17 years that I have been an early childhood educator. I want that to sink in because that whole overworked and underpaid teacher dynamic can be taken to an extreme in early childhood ed. And it's not always the highest valued profession. Once when I met someone for the first time and told them what I do, they told me if they were going to teach, it would be older children, when it would actually make a difference. Pro tip, don't say that to early childhood educators. So how have I been able to do this for so long? Obviously, I enjoy it, and I'm passionate about it. Early educational experiences set the stage for future experiences, encouraging readiness in every developmental area, from cognitive to social-emotional. If anything, I feel added pressure as the first classroom experience for these students and their families. I am constantly trying to think of more and different ways to engage students at this critical learning time. Luckily, like with most schools, the population changes each year, offering a fresh dynamic and giving me a new audience and new engagement opportunities. Except one year, I moved from the preschool classroom at my center into the kindergarten or pre-K. And students who'd been in my class for a year or more, we were going to be together all over again. And this group, I'd learned, was not particularly fond of singing. This mattered at our attendance time because we would greet each child with a song. It was actually a great opportunity to discuss early math concepts like one-to-one correspondence, counting who was at school, or pattern awareness around children's schedules. I knew this group and I would not survive another year of their not singing, and yet they valued this time, and the skills that we learned in practice during it were so important. So I needed a solution to keep attendance time without the songs. I knew several children in these groups spoke other languages at home with their families, and I wondered if we could swap singing for greeting each other in these home languages instead. In order to do so, I needed to learn them too. And I discovered there were some languages I wasn't even aware of. I challenged myself and my students in learning the basics of 7 languages that year. And that's actually why I'm here. Not to teach you how to say hello, or hola, ohio, but to share the effect that it had. Because at first thought, it might seem really simple, but it turned out to be one of the most impactful activities I ever did in my classroom. Looking back, I understand why. And I want to unpack that experience for you. Teachers want to reach all families and connect with all students. Every teacher asks themselves, what more can I be doing? Or am I doing enough? Countless professional development workshops or courses I've taken over the years have stressed specifically connecting with families from different cultural backgrounds and having diverse representation in your classroom. The problem is, teachers are expected to be the expert. So besides obstacles like already being potentially overworked and underpaid, having many other priorities and time issues to reconcile, and needing to be the expert at far too much, the truth is, you cannot be the expert at someone else's culture. So how do we resolve this? Because cultural competence is important and authentic representation is key. So not me and not my voice. This brings us back to my classroom, where I wrote a note to families explaining my new greeting plan. The first thing you do in learning any new language is to find out how to say hello and ask, how are you? But the way you do that is different with each language and each culture. So I asked families to share this piece of themselves with the group. Once I knew who could teach what, I sought them out one at a time to let them know Mandarin Chinese or Haitian Creole will be our next language. And I asked, not for a translation exactly, but how they would greet a friend. This translation piece turned out to be very important, as a mother from Japan told me she worried Japanese people must be really rude because she would never say thank you, as in, I'm fine, thanks. But manners are a social construct, and cultural context is extremely important. By having our group be able to authentically greet any Japanese friend, that was the most respectful choice we could make, I assured her, the opposite of rude. By doing this, I validated their cultural identity and our commitment to its authentic representation in the classroom. I demonstrated to all the students that Different experiences are an asset, and I put myself on a more equal ground, sharing the position of power. In fact, although he's older now, I had the chance to ask one of my students from this year what he remembers about the experience, and that's the part he remembered specifically, saying, "I thought it was pretty cool because then I thought I could tell the teachers what to do." You might be asking yourself what this has to do with your classroom, or how much time in or outside of the class this could take. But we all agree that we want to reach all students and connect with all families. So make this change. Don't ask what more you can do, at least not you alone. Shift from a solo expertise to a shared expertise. Don't expect to be the expert. Teach learning instead. But how do you teach learning? Well, students saw me asking these speakers of other languages, and sometimes asking again, and they knew the source was beyond me and yet was respected by me. One mother shared with me her child's perspective that he learned Chinese from his friend and said other students knew languages that they taught. I allowed mistakes to be seen and learned from. Sometimes I wasn't just modeling learning, I was learning. I had heard in songs or books that jambo means hello. But did you know in Kiswahili you would actually say hujambo when greeting one person and hamjambo when greeting a group? I didn't until I asked. I learned that from a grandmother who never even stepped foot inside my classroom. Because I'd written this note to families asking about these other languages, I discovered one of my students lived upstairs from his grandmother, who is from the Democratic Republic of Congo and who speaks Kiswahili, among other languages. Through her son and my student's father, we would basically write notes to each other until any of my mistakes and misconceptions were corrected. And I was able to share this reliable and authentic greeting with the group. Your classroom will be different. If you're wondering how to do any of this if you don't have a population who speaks other languages or you're not allowed to speak languages other than English in your school, find anything that opens children's eyes to an authentic cultural representation. This year in my class, we have a map where we've drawn a line from each folktale we've read to the country from which it originates. And we just finished an art show inspired by global folk art. Ask your families and their students for their perspectives. Trust them to help liven up a part of the day that is feeling kind of tired, or even if it's not. Identify a way that you can take their experiences into this shared expertise. Use your voice and your role as teacher to amplify the voice of others and validate other people's experience, especially those different from your own. We've heard that, sadly, certain voices are the ones most heard or respected. But use your time to become a respectful listener and learner instead, not an expert. That's how, but why? No matter what or whom you teach, this is relevant. There's a cultural context for more than you may realize. Besides, teaching learning is valuable because it shows students how to, that it's okay to, or whom to ask for help. Putting myself in a position, having something to learn from even my young students, boosted their self-esteem in other ways. Despite the perceived simplicity on my end, this was meaningful for students and their families, and the results far outweighed my expectations. I was able to connect with families in ways I didn't even realize, and I was validating their input without disrupting their busy lives. In early ed especially, we see parents who want to participate in the classroom or programs that ask for parent involvement, but it mostly accommodates people who can easily get time off or don't work. Remember that grandmother? She didn't need to physically be there for her voice and presence to be heard and felt. As for my students, I was seeing new leaders emerge in the classroom. Children were being asked how to say things in another language at other times of the day, and this role of teacher was shared and redefined. I opened children to a world beyond themselves so that bilingual and multilingual children viewed those languages as an asset, and other children were exposed to a new language but given the chance to step back and become better listeners and learners. What seemed like just another way to say hello allowed students and their families the opportunity to be leaders in educating and enriching a culturally competent environment. Frederick Douglass said, "It is easier to build strong children than to repair broken men." This feels particularly poignant in today's sociopolitical climate where things feel kind of broken. Also, it helps validate that what we do matters, even me with the youngest children. They may not have wanted to sing, but these students found their voice. Thank you. Woo.